My great-grandmother Annie's candied walnuts are coated with a sweet cinnamon and sugar mixture and baked to a crispy, crunchy perfection. They're great for snacking or giving as a gift, or my favorite, added to a salad. These candied walnuts are light, perfectly sweet, with just a hint of cinnamon. To make my great-grandmother Annie's sugared walnuts, you'll start with 16 ounces of shelled walnuts, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1/2 cup of white sugar, 2 egg whites, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. This recipe is very straightforward. In your mixing bowl, start with your dry ingredients: 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1/2 cup of white sugar, teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of cinnamon. Mix all your dry ingredients together. Now make sure that you really break up those chunks of sugar and blend it really thoroughly. This is really a minor but yet an important step. Once you're thoroughly blended, put it aside. Before you go any further, turn your oven on to 300 degrees so it can be preheating. And your next step is to take your 2 egg whites and your vanilla, and with your wire whisk you want to just whisk it until it's frothy. Okay, you can see our egg whites and vanilla are getting nice and frothy. If you're like me and you don't like to waste ingredients, I made lemon curd yesterday, which my recipe, which you can find on my channel, requires 3 eggs, 1 whole egg, and 2 egg yolks. So I took my egg yolks yesterday and made my lemon curd and saved my egg whites for this recipe today. So now once your egg whites are all frothy and beaten, it's time to stir your walnuts into the mix. I'm using a whisk, but I can tell you this is not the best tool. So I've added all my walnuts, all 16 ounces of them, to my frothy egg white, and making sure they're really well coated, and they are. And now it's time to take that beautiful sugar and cinnamon mixture that we blended together, and you pour it right on top of the nuts, and you stir them around until they're really well coated, and they already smell delicious, cinnamony and sweet, and this reminds me of Christmas. So our nuts are beautifully coated. You'll need a baking sheet lined in either a baking pad, or I'm using parchment, and you're just going to spread these beautiful nuts out on this baking sheet. And it'll take a few minutes to separate them. You want a single layer. You don't want them to be on top of each other. So take your time at this point. So really work with your spatula and try to separate them as best you can. You won't be 100%. And as they start to dry out in the oven, because they will come out nice and crisp and crunchy, they'll start separating on their own. So back to my story when I used to look forward to these when I would go to visit my grandparents. Unfortunately for me, those delicious walnuts required a hammer and a lot of patience. My grandmother would hand me a gunny sack full of old walnuts, and my job was to sit out on the porch and shell all the walnuts. But once the job was done, I knew that those delicious walnuts would be my reward. These delicious, easy to make candied walnuts are always a holiday favorite in our family.